with my co-host Jason Sunkle tonight, and we are jumping on to double down on our over/unders. Last week we did the Eastern Conference. Tonight we are going to focus on the Western Conference. I don't know if you've thought about this at all, Jay, but I think this one is going to be relatively, I guess, harder, or there's going to be more teams that I feel like the number is going to be the number, and it's going to be hard where it could go either way because it just feels like
Well,
there's so many good teams in the Western
yeah.
Conference.
So when I look at these, and obviously you don't have the, I don't know if you did any. I have the numbers. I pulled the numbers off FanDuel again, so it's the same exact website. And I don't know how much you've looked at or thought about it, but some of these numbers I was kind of floored at the numbers. So we'll definitely dive in here and talk about them. So we're going to go alphabetically like we did last week. And we're going to start with the Dallas Mavericks for the Western Conference, Mike. The over under for the Dallas Mavericks is 49.5. Man, I just look at the Western Conference and you look at how many teams there are, like how many good teams there are, and I just can't get the Dallas Mavericks to 50 wins. I'm taking the under. I just can't. I can't do it. And who knows? Kyrie's going to probably get hurt. Luka's not going to be in shape for the first few weeks of the season. I'm taking the under here purely at the fact that, Mike, there are one, two, three. There are three teams that have higher over unders than them, but there are like two or three other teams that are like really close to their total. I just can't get them to 50 wins. I'm going under.
Are you buying the Clay Thompson experience?
Well, that's the other factor that obviously we don't know. But I mean, we saw
What's your
what he.
gut? What's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that he's probably a good sixth man off the bench, Mike, at this point in his career, and that can play in the stretch and down the stretch. I mean, he wasn't great last year, right? I mean, he had flashes, but his defense is definitely down, and that team. That's the big problem with that team is their defense is terrible. So you're going to have Luka, Kyrie, and Clay Thompson, who's down on the defensive front. I just don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so if you start out, obviously, any discussion of the Mavericks begins and ends with Luca, and clearly, if he's healthy, he's going to be a top five player in the league at worst. So I think you know what you're getting from him. Kyrie, did they catch lightning in a bottle with him last year where everything kind of went right? Yeah, he missed a few games, but for the most part, he was kind of a good citizen and
Kind of.
played the way that they needed him to play. So is that going to happen again? Maybe, but certainly maybe not. I think Clay Thompson, as you said, is a guy who still has value as an offensive player and as a guy who can shoot it and space the floor as an all court, both ends of the floor type player. I don't know that he really has a ton left on the defensive end of the floor. Not that he's a complete liability, but he certainly isn't a plus defender at this point in his career. On the upside, right, Derek Lively, you would think that coming off his really good rookie year and then his strong performance in the playoffs, at least up until the finals, leads you to think that he's going to continue to improve and get better. Where's PJ Washington at? Do you think what he did last year is sustainable and is he going to continue to get better? I'm with you on this one. I think that 49 and a half, getting them to 50 in the Western Conference with the potential for Kyrie difficulties, with the potential of Klay Thompson maybe not being as good as what the Mavericks hope. And then with the potential for, I know Luka had a little calf strain this week, and I think he missed their first exhibition game, if I'm not mistaken. Not that that's, again, a serious injury that's going to keep him out for a long time, but he does seem to miss games here and there. And obviously, when he's out, it makes a huge difference for the Mavericks. So I'm going to go under on the Mavs as well. I just think that there's a lot of things that have to go right. And for them to get to 50 in the Western Conference, I just don't feel like this team is deep enough to be able to sustain a long period of no Kyrie or no Luka, which potentially could happen. So I'm going to go under on the Mavs too.
All right, sweet. The Denver Nuggets. Man, I just look at these numbers and I'm just like, the Denver Nuggets, 50.5 is their over under, Mike. I'm going to go the over on them, and I know Jokic probably isn't going to. I mean, but here's the thing: Jokic doesn't come in and is completely out of shape, even though he's probably smoking cigars all of summer, over the summer, riding, his donkeys or horses or whatever he does over in this country.
Donkeys,
I don't know. To him, they probably look like donkeys because he's a big dude. I just, for whatever reason, that team is going to come. Now, once again, this probably all is hinged on Jamal Murray and how healthy he is, right? I think this is really because we know what we're going to get from Jokic. Okay. How healthy is Jamal Murray? But I just think there's just too many teams that don't have someone that can guard Jokic, that he can do everything, and he just makes his whole team better. And I just have more faith in Denver getting to that 51 wins, and really getting over the 50. Now, if they don't get there, I think they're going to be at 50. Like, they're going to be right there. But yeah, I'm going to say over, Mike, just because it's historically, I mean, Denver's been Denver. I mean, what else am I going to say? They until I'm proven otherwise, I'm going to say it's kind of like my old theory that Golden State, what we had with Golden State was, I'm not going to go against Golden State until I'm proven otherwise. I'm not going to go against Denver until I'm proven otherwise. So I'm going to take the over.
Denver, obviously, the discussion starts with Jokic and the fact that he's been a guy who's been very, very dependable and plays 70-plus games year in and year out. And when you have him out on the floor, he's an offense unto himself and a 3-time MVP. Clearly, no matter where you want to put him, a top 3 player in the league, whether you want to rank him number 1 or rank him behind somebody else, he's right there at the top. And he just makes everybody better. So as you said, Jokic is a constant. I think you just throw him into the lineup with any number of guys and you're probably penciling in 45 wins just by having Jokic in your lineup. And then after that, you look, and history would tell you that Jamal Murray should be a relative certainty, but with how he played last season and then what he did in the Olympics, pretty concerning in terms of what he's all about. I mean, is he healthy? Has he lost a step? Is he compromised in some way? What's really going on with him? Obviously, he has the injuries that affected him going into the Olympics. As much as you'd like to say he should be a sure thing based on what he's done in the past, you look at him right now and he's a question mark. Michael Porter Jr., been healthy for the last season and a half, the last 2 seasons, but certainly his injury history makes you think he could certainly miss some time. Then you go and you look at the rest of what they have. I mean, Aaron Gordon, another guy you can probably pencil in. He's been relatively healthy. So those 4 guys are clearly the part of the lineup that helped contribute to an NBA title 2 seasons ago. They lose KCP to Orlando, let him walk, decide not to pay him. So now you're looking at, there's a lot riding on the young guys that they have on this roster. Can Julian Strawther be the shooter that they need? Can Peyton Watson, who played a pretty decent role during the regular season last year, but then kind of got buried in the playoffs, can he continue to provide what they need off the bench? And then Christian Brown, I think, is the guy that really holds the key to what this team becomes, because he hasn't really been a guy who has been a dependable shooter. Now, he's brought energy. He's been a good defensive player. He can get to the basket. He's a smart player, but he really hasn't been able to shoot it. And so when you're looking at Denver and I don't know, I guess I was listening this morning to the Hoop Collective, and they were talking about the games that Denver and Boston played overseas in Abu Dhabi. And in those particular games, I think Boston shot 108 threes and Denver attempted 62. And just the idea that Denver has been over the last couple of seasons one of the lowest, not percentage, but just in terms of the number of attempts of threes per game. And at some point, that becomes really untenable when you start talking about the math and trying to get to where this team wants to go. And obviously, Christian Brown, no matter how you look at it, he's going to be a downgrade from KCP. And so, where do they get that extra 3-point shooting? And last year, if you remember, Jokic's 3-pointer, especially in the playoffs towards the end of the regular season, really dropped off. It seemed to he just wasn't able to make threes. And so if that continues to be the case this season where he's not a 3-point shooter, man, things are going to be tough for Denver to get to the number of 3-pointers that they need to get their offense to where they want it to go up in the upper whatever top 10 in the league. And so that's, I think, the question mark. I'm going to go over on the Nuggets too, just because of my belief in Jokic. But I mean, it's, again, I think we're going to say this for every one of these teams. Like it can go either way, but I'm going to go over on Denver just because of my belief in Jokic.
Okay. All right. The next one, Golden State Warriors. The over-under is 43.5. I am so far under this that I have no faith in this team. I just think of all the teams in the West. And here's what I'm going to say. I think the Vegas knows that historically Golden State's been good. And they want a number that's slightly enticing to people. I cannot get to over on the Golden State Warriors. When I started thinking like through the Western Conference teams, how many teams in the Western Conference do I think are going to be better than the Golden State Warriors this season? I think that I was able to come up with 2 or 3 teams that I don't think are going to be better than the Golden State Warriors this season, Mike. Maybe 4. So I'm going to go ahead and say the under on Golden State.
So here's the thing, right? Somebody has to be bad in the Western Conference. I mean, somebody has to be down in spots 11, 12, 13, somewhere down in there. And Golden State is certainly as good of a candidate as anybody to be down there in the bottom. On the other hand, you can make the glass half full proposition too, depending on how you want to look at the guys they have. So, Steph, is there a drop off? I don't know exactly where he is in terms of, again, what we saw in the Olympics from Steph, and the last impression that he left with us against France was certainly a good one. However, at the same time, he's getting up there in age. And at some point, a guy like him who relies on the amount of movement off the ball and the things that he does out on the floor, obviously the shooting's always going to be there, but at some point does the quickness, does the ability to run basically for 48 minutes, does that start to erode just a little bit? And if it does, how does that affect him? I actually feel pretty confident that Steph's going to be pretty close to being Steph. Draymond, on the other hand, I think we've already seen a drop in his play. And of course, last year he had all the goofiness that gets him suspended. Can you trust him to be on the floor? I think I would probably have to vote no on that. And then after that, you're just looking at what's the development going to be of Jonathan Kuminga. What's the development going to be of Brandon Pajemski? Those are two guys that I think if you're sort of on the over for Golden State, you're thinking that those two guys are going to take maybe not a leap into stardom, but a leap into being quality starters on a good team. And maybe one of those guys does that. I'm not sure they both do. And then after that, Wiggins, I mean, caught lightning in a bottle against the Celtics in the 22 finals. And since then, he's never been the same. And I know that there was some family issues and things that were going on with him. But do I trust him to get back to that level that he was at in 22 when he was probably their second best player in that finals when they won the championship? I really don't. And so I think, again, that number it's right about where I think they'll probably finish. I mean, it depends, I think, on Steph's health. I think if Steph's healthy, I think they can get there. But somebody has to be bad in the Western Conference. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go under. So we're 3 for 3 in agreements here.
All right. We're going to take a brief recess for 1 second. Mike, I'm going to go grab other headphones. Hold on one second.
All right, let's try that.
All right. Can you hear me, Mike, still?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
Yeah, you were just.
No, it said that it stopped my recording, Mike, and then I had to start a new one because I switched my headphones, just so you know.
Let me look.
So,
all right. Yeah, yeah, that'll be all right. I should be able to fix that somehow, some way. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. Next up is Houston Rockets. They have the same number as the Golden State Warriors, Mike, 43.5. So I know when we were sitting here talking, I don't know, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, about what position we'd rather be in with Houston, and I don't remember who we were talking about. Houston and who else? So when we were talking about the free agency.
We talked about Houston quite a bit. I don't remember who we were comparing them to be completely honest.
So 43.5. I still think that's, once again, I'm just looking at these teams in the West, Mike, and I'm just like, man, someone, like I said, that seems high for me. Just because I just think, and there's another team there's two teams that are really low, or that are lower than I would think. I think 43.5 is too high for Houston, and I'm going under here, and I just think I think there's got to be, like, here's what I'm gonna say. I can't say that I sat and watched a single Houston Rockets game last year, but I can also say that while I'm scrolling the Twitter timeline, there were a whole lot of Houston Rockets highlights being featured. And maybe I listen, I get Udoka's a great coach, and they were hot to start the season, and then they trailed off. Can they sustain that for the whole season? Can they not? I don't know. I think 43.5 is too high, so I'm going with the under.
Okay, so I'm going to go over, and here's why. I think one of the things you hit on, and that is that Ime Udoka, I think, is a good basketball coach, and I think he dramatically improved their style of play, their culture last season, and that's what led to the improvement. Got them to 41 wins last year, and you're asking them to improve their win total by 3, which, again, this is a young team. They obviously have a couple veterans that they brought over in Van Vliet and Dylan Brooks, who have been there for a year now. They also have Steven Adams, which who knows where he is health-wise or where he'll be once the season starts.
Didn't I see that he was going to be out for a while? Didn't I say?
It would certainly wouldn't surprise me. I don't know.
I'll just stand behind the scenes looking.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure on that, but again, he's a guy who, if he's healthy and can play, clearly is a valuable player. And then you look at their young guys and you start to say, how do you feel about each one of those guys? And we've talked about them in depth. Whether you building around Şengün as your guy in the middle? Does Şengün's presence get in the way of Jalen Green's development? Where does he fit? Jabari looks like as a number 2 pick, he's not going to be a superstar, but he may be one of those guys who can be the 3rd best player on a championship team, who's 6'10", 6'11", can shoot it, can defend all over the floor. Clearly a good role player. Amen Thompson, I think we've talked about both the Thompson twins over and over again, and we both really like their skill set. They just can't shoot the ball, but I think that on good teams, they certainly have roles. And then you talk about the number 3 pick in the draft, Reed Shepherd, who many people thought in Summer League certainly looked better than Reece Sachet and Alex Sarr, who were
I don't know.
drafted
Reece
ahead of him.
Sachet's looked pretty good. Like tonight, he looked pretty good.
All right. I didn't check the box score, but I'll take your word for it. Anyway, I guess my point is that I think when you look at the trajectory that the Houston Rockets are on, if you have belief in several of the young guys on this team, I didn't even mention Cam Whitmore, and you got Tari Eason, and they just have a lot of different pieces. And I'm not sure that when this team eventually comes together, who's still going to be a part of it. And maybe those veteran guys are gone and you start to retool around the young guys. But at least for this season, I like their mix of veterans and the young guys continuing to develop. Both Şengün and Green had various stretches where last season it looked like they had kind of started to find their way into who they might actually become. And like I said, I think Jabari is going to be, he's going to be a really good player in this league for a long time. He's going to be a guy that is going to make a lot of money and a lot of teams are going to want, because I think he just has a skill set that's pretty unique at his size. I don't know. I just like a lot of their young guys, and I think Udoka is a good coach. And so I'm going to go over on the Houston Rockets. They're a team that I think is maybe going to surprise some teams above them and creep up into where I don't think they can get to the 6, but I think they're going to be up in that 7-8 slot for the play-in this year.
All right. The Los Angeles Clippers. The over-under is 38.5, Mike. Once again, I think this is pretty darn close to the number. But listen, they lost Paul. Key on acquisitions. They lost Paul George. Kawhi Leonard doesn't even know if we don't know what he's playing. If he's playing, he might retire. I'm going under. and I want to be clear here. Ty Lue is a great coach, but they're opening this new stadium. And they've got nothing, right? Like,
well, they have James Harden. They have the James Harden system, right? He's going to take back over and circumvent and head back to 2017 Houston James Harden, where everything centers around him. And to be honest, if that's the case, I mean, he's not the player that he was 7 years ago. That's the first thing. And secondly, we've said it millions of times that if your team and your franchise is centered around James Harden, which if Kawhi Leonard is going to be out, which I think we can safely assume that Kawhi is going to miss a multitude of games, I just don't know what else they're really building around. I mean, I guess you have Zubac in the middle, right? Quality center. You got Norman Powell, who's been the 6th man of the year. They signed Derek Jones Jr., who had a good year for the Mavericks last year. So they have some pieces, but the pieces to me don't really make a whole lot of sense if you're centering that system around James Harden. Now, if you're centering it around Kawhi and you have Harden playing a secondary role, I think it makes a little bit more sense, but I have no confidence that Kawhi is going to play anywhere near even 50% of these Clippers games. And if James Harden at age 35 is going to be carrying a load similar to what he did back when he was the center of the universe in Houston, the odds of him staying healthy and not missing time and of playing to that level, I'd say are pretty low. So I'm going to go under on the Clippers. I think to me, this is an easy one. I just I don't see how this team gets above 38.5. Unless Kawhi gets some miracle healing, I don't see how it happens. So I'm going under.
All right. The other team in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Lakers, featuring the new superstar Bronny James. 42.5, Mike. Oof. Oof. I can't. This team ends at 500, so I'm taking the under on the Los Angeles Lakers. Yeah, because listen, we know what's going to happen. At some point, Anthony Davis is going to get hurt, and at some point, he's not playing 82 games. Okay, he's just not. He's not able to. He's going to average 27 and 7 or something like that. Something insane for a 30. He's 39 now, right? He'll be 40 this year. Is that accurate?
Correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, yeah, because he's like 2 years older than me almost. So I'm just telling you, man, I don't play basketball on a daily basis, and I sit on the floor and I sit in a chair and then I stand up and my back starts to hurt, or I stand up and I've got aches and pains, and I'm not playing a professional sport called basketball and running up the floor, and I know I'm not even close to anything, have any of the talents or abilities or money sunk into my body that LeBron has, but he's not playing. What's the cap? What's the cap? Like 60 games, 65 games? Like how many games does he even play? Like if they're legitimately going to try to do something in the playoffs, they can't play him more than 60, I don't think, because they're going to need him to be in playoff mode. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's going to play 75 games and be like, I'm a 40-year-old. I'm playing more games than these youngins. I go sit in my hyperbaric chamber every night. But I don't see it. I don't see there's any way they get to 42.5. I'm taking under, but I want to be clear. I think it's going to be close. I think they could go 41-41, and I think they could go 40. They could win 43 games. I'm taking the under on this, Mike. I'm taking the under.
They won 47 last year with extremely good health for LeBron and AD. And to bet on that again, I think is probably a losing bet. And then, the rest of your starting lineup is D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. Not sure how I feel about that. And then their bench, you're right away talking about like.
Wait, okay, can we really quickly?
Sure.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Yeah, go.
Who's playing more minutes this season? This is a question for you. I want you to think. This is a prop bet.
Okay.
Bronny James or Ben Simmons? Who's playing more minutes this year?
Oh, Simmons is going to play more.
You think he's going to be healthy?
I don't know. He's going to play more than Bronny. Bronny's going to play. So I think if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that the G League season starts like, I don't know, maybe a month after the NBA season starts. So yeah. Bronny's going to be with the Lakers for a month. They'll get the Bronny and LeBron on the court together moment out of the way. And then I just don't see how he plays. I don't know if I should have sent you the tweet, but I saw a tweet today that I thought was pretty funny. It said
Brick Center.
No, well, was it the one that the two-way he's a two-way cardio guy?
Yeah.
So we got to get him out. Got to get him out there. He's a two-way cardio guy. I got a kick out of that one. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, did you see my favorite?
There's just no way he's going to play.
My favorite Bronny James tweet was, "Oh, Bronny James chase down block like his dad," and his chase down block was literally like 5 steps. And I'm like, no, come on now, come on, idiots. And the guy got the rebound and got the layup. So
there's just no way he's going to play. There's just no way. And look, I don't claim to be a Bronny James expert, but when you're a guy who averaged 4 points a game in college and you're a guard and you don't have one standout, unbelievable skill, I just don't see how they find minutes for him. And again, he's going to get on the floor in the first month of the season. He's probably going to be with the Lakers until the G League season ramps up. And then I would guess after that it's going to go away. He's going to be playing for the Lakers G League team, and that'll be the end of it for at least this season. And who knows? Again, maybe he has an opportunity to develop, maybe he doesn't, but he's certainly not going to be an important part of figuring out whether the Lakers are going to go over 42 and a half games. And to me,
yeah.
I think the elephant in the room here is, can JJ Redick coach? And we have no idea. We've seen guys that come in having never coached that it goes really well. And we've, on the other hand, seen it go the other way. And due to the fact that LeBron over the course of his career has proven to be pretty hard to coach, and I know him and JJ have a relationship from the podcast and whatever, I don't know if that makes it worse, better. I have no idea. To me, there's a lot of things that you're throwing into the pot that I'm just not sure I'm willing to bet on Redick being a good coach, LeBron and AD staying healthy, and their secondary guys. I mean, their bench is just, I mean, Max Christie, Jackson Hayes, Vincent, Christian Wood. I mean, no thanks, man. I mean, I don't like their bench. I don't like their depth. Yeah, if AD and LeBron both play 70 games, they probably get over that number, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think they have enough depth. And I'm going to go under on the LA Lakers, just like you.
All right. So right now, just the status check, we've done 6 of them, and we've only disagreed on 1. Accurate?
The Houston Rockets, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, the Memphis Grizzlies. The over-under, 47.5. Obviously, Ja's coming back. He's good to go, right? He's good to go.
Yeah, healthy, yes, 100%.
Healthy, okay. Healthy.
Although he did get hit by a pass and twisted his ankle, I think, in their first exhibition game, but not.
Did he then immediately go to the club and flash a gun? Like,
no, he did not. Not a serious injury, and no firearms have been involved in the season to this point that I'm aware of.
Okay. So I think once again, this all relies on Ja Morant, right? This number completely relies on him. Yes, they have pieces and parts. Other than that, but I mean, you saw last year when he played, they were good. And then when he came back from the suspension, they were pitiful until he came back from the suspension. Then he came back from the suspension. Your wins pick was looking better.
That was a killer, man. That was a killer for me, lad.
Then he got hurt, and they were done. So I think we can't really judge the Memphis Grizzlies based on last season, because it's too difficult. 47.5 is a pretty tall order. I think that's the same number that the Cavs are given. So if I was to say, who do I think is better? The Cavs or Memphis? I probably would say that I feel like the Cavs are better right now. And I also recognize that Memphis is going to probably play a tougher schedule because you're going to play more Western Conference teams than Eastern Conference teams. Correct, Mike? Correct.
Any Western Conference team is going to have a tougher schedule than the Eastern Conference.
Yes. So with that all being said, I'm going to take the under on the Memphis Grizzlies, but I think they're close. I think they're a 46 win team. But once again, we're going to get to some of these other bigger numbers coming up here. That I think I've got to go under on this, but it's going to be close.
All right. So prior to Ja's issues, and this is basically with the same core of guys. So you're talking about Bane, Jaren Jackson, and Ja Morant. I'm just looking at the standings for the last 4 seasons. So in 21-22, the Memphis Grizzlies won 56 games. That was the 21-22 season. The 22-23 season, and by the way, they were the 2nd seed in that season. Then in 22-23, they were again the second seed. They won 51 games. Then Ja gets into his difficulty last year, and they fall off the table, and they won. What was the number last year? It was very low.
No.
Why am I scrolling down here? They won 27 games. So if you look at their roster, the honest truth is that it makes a ton of sense if Ja Morant is your centerpiece. If Ja Morant is not your centerpiece, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Desmond Bane, very good off the catch,
Off the
has
ball.
improved as a
Yeah.
pick and roll ball handler, but certainly not a guy that if you're building a top 5, top 10 NBA offense, you're not putting the ball in Desmond Bane's hands in that way. Marcus Smart, we know what he is. Last year he was injured, didn't play a whole lot. Good guy off the ball, not a guy that you want to have as your primary ball handler. Jaren Jackson didn't have nearly as good of a season last year as he did the year before when he was a defensive player of the year, and then went into the World Cup in the Philippines and kind of stumbled and just never really recovered last year. But clearly a guy who, when you put him next to Morant, makes a lot of sense as a guy who can defend the rim on one end, a guy who is a versatile offensive player, maybe not quite the three-point shooter that people had hoped he was going to develop into, but certainly he's a guy who at least can fire it up from out there. And then they got some other decent pieces that I like coming off the bench. You got, they got Luke Kennard to be able to shoot the ball coming off the bench. You got Brandon Clark coming back, hopefully at some point from the Achilles tear that he had 2 years ago. Of course, they got Zach Edey, who it seems like, based on all the buzz, that he's going to be their starting center, and people seem to feel like he's going to be a good starting center. And if that ends up being the case, you have him in the middle, and then you put Jaren Jackson next to him. They're going to have a big team. They're going to have a versatile team. I like this team. If you're going to bet the over, you're betting on Ja Morant, that he's gotten things straightened out. To be honest, I have no idea whether he does or he doesn't, and only time is going to tell. But when Morant's on the court, he's electric. He's a guy that people like to play with. We said it before all this stuff came down, that he just is, for a guy who's a superstar, he's an unselfish passer. His teammates, at least in the past, seem to like him and gravitate to him. And I'm going to go over on the Memphis Grizzlies.
Can I just push back on one thing? Like, can I push
go
back
for
on one
it.
thing?
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
you're going back and like referring to 2 years ago and 3 years ago, but
Yeah.
that was before Phoenix had 3 superstars on their team. That was before Minnesota was any good. That was before Oklahoma City was any good. That was when Zion Williamson was injured.
Look, I'm not disagreeing. I mean, the West clearly.
Houston was pitiful. I'm just saying,
look, clearly the West is better than it was in the 2021-22 season when they won 56 games. 56 games. But by the same token, I think that you look at the core of that team, and those guys were really young that year. And yeah, they had Steven Adams at that point and some other veterans that are no longer with them. But still, the bulk of that work was still done by Morant and Jaren Jackson and Bane. And so to say that those guys are now 3 or 4 years older, and not older in a sense of they're not pushing into their mid-30s, they're older, getting to the point where they should be at the peak of their careers. I just think that if those guys are healthy, and again, this is with every team, right? If their players are healthy, there's a good chance that I think Memphis gets by that number, which again means that eventually we're going to get to some teams here where we're going to have to pick the under, because I've picked a lot of overs to this point. So I just think Memphis, if Ja is right, I think the rest of that roster makes sense around him. And it's just a bet on Ja Morant to stay out of trouble and stay on the floor. And I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen. So that's why I'm going over.
Okay. All right. The next up, Minnesota Timberwolves, 52.5. Mike, that's a big number. Anthony Edwards, clearly on the rise, although he wasn't as involved with the Olympics as I would have thought, but he played a good amount. But the team no, they obviously traded Cat. All right. And they got Julius Randle and who else they got? Dante DiVincenzo, right? I guess
Yep.
those are the three. I don't know. I think it's going to take some time to figure it out. And figure the offense out. I think the defense is going to be fine. But the offense is going to need to be figured out. I'm going to take the under here, Mike, just because. I mean, I don't know. I know we talked last week about the trade, and we talked about how we didn't think it really helped the Knicks. I don't think this trade helps either team.
It's
I just don't.
to me with Minnesota, it's addition by subtraction is how I feel about it. I'm just not a Cat fan. I don't think that he's a guy that you can win with. And yeah, he has a very, very unique skill set. And when he's going well, you can see the vision for what theoretical Karl Anthony Towns is supposed to be. But I just think his mentality, his approach, his lack of basketball IQ, I think he's always going to come back to bite you. Maybe it'll bite you in the regular season. Maybe it'll bite you in the first round. Maybe it'll bite you in the second. At some point, it's going to rear its ugly head and cause your team a problem. So I think by getting rid of Karl Anthony Towns, I think that's a plus. Now, is it a plus in the regular season? I'm not 100% sure. There's still some, I don't think Julius Randle has taken the floor yet, at least not in any real meaningful situation. He hasn't played, I don't know how many preseason games they've played, if they've played one or they played two, but he didn't play in at least their first preseason game and then was, I guess, somewhat evasive in answering reporters' questions about when he would be back out on the floor. So coming off that serious shoulder separation, obviously they want to see him on the floor. And that goes back to your point of trying to figure out what the offense looks like. Defensively, this team's still going to be good. You got Gobert in the middle. Edwards, still a very, very good defender and probably growing on that end of the floor. You got Jaden McDaniels, who's one of the best wing defenders in the whole league. They have lots of pieces. I think if you're betting the over here, you're betting on Anthony Edwards becoming a top 5 player in the league every single night at age 23, which, look, we were ready to coronate him last year during that Phoenix series and then against Denver as, hey, could this guy take Minnesota to the championship and then turn around and win a gold medal and make it the summer of Anthony Edwards? And suddenly he's the face of the league. And it didn't happen, not as any knock on Anthony Edwards, but he didn't continue to rise the way it looked like maybe he was going to after that Phoenix and Denver series. At 23, it seems like a tall ask for him to carry this team to the top of a very, very difficult Western Conference. And although I like getting rid of Cat, I think in the long run, it's a good move for Minnesota, both financially and just for their team. But I think the Western Conference, look, Minnesota very likely may win 50 games. I think asking this team to get to 53, I think that's a tall order. Although I like their team, I like Anthony Edwards, I like where they're headed. I just think that the Western Conference this year is so difficult that to think that this team's going to get to 53, I just don't see it. So I'm going under on Minnesota, despite the fact that I like their team. DiVincenzo was a big add. He's going to really, really help them. And Randall, I have no idea. Randall could end up being a really, really good addition if they can make it work and figure out the spacing. On the other hand, I could see it being a complete dud. Yeah, well, I don't even know if a disaster, because to me, I think even if you just traded and got rid of Towns and got nothing back, I think now Minnesota the roster just makes more sense. So to me, it's either is Randall additive or does he just he's really becomes a non-factor. I don't know what to make of him. I'm not sure how it's going to fit because, again, you want Edwards to have the ball, and Julius Randle's kind of a bully ball type of guy that likes to back in and assess the floor and hold the ball in his hands and make decisions. And he's a good decision maker. He can pass, and obviously he can score. He's a 2-time All-NBA guy, so he's a very, very good player. He just has kind of, again, a unique, different sort of playing style that when you put him next to a guy who's ball dominant, which is kind of what happened with Brunson in New York, his effectiveness is maybe limited. So I don't know how much he raises Minnesota's ceiling. I think the subtraction of Cat to me, when we start talking about playoffs versus regular season, to me the getting rid of Cat helps them for the playoffs, because I think just getting rid of a low IQ player whose approach I don't think really fits with what you want to do on a championship team, to me that's a plus regardless of what you got back from him. So I think Randall could go either way. It could either be, well, we just got rid of Cat and that's all that kind of the trade accomplished, plus getting DiVincenzo in there with his ability to shoot threes, or maybe somehow they figure something out with Randall and it really raises the ceiling of this team. I don't have a feel for which one of those it's going to be, but I don't think he gets them to 53 wins in the regular season. So I'm going under.
Okay. Next up, the New Orleans Pelicans. The over-under, 45.5, Mike. I'm hitting that over button. Over. I know there's been a lot of scuttlebutt with Brandon Ingram. Is he going to get traded? Is he not? As of this moment, hasn't happened, right?
Has not happened.
Will it happen at some point in the season? Maybe. Zion's, by all reports, looks like he's in good shape. He's played pretty well in camp from what I've read. I'm going over, Mike. I'm liking my chances with the Zion Williamson domination come into play. And I just like where this team's headed. I think if everything goes the way that it could go, this team's gonna rise and be a I won't say a contender, but a team that can make some noise. So I'm saying New Orleans, Mike, is going on the over of 45.5.
So number one, if Zion's healthy, 45.5, I think they get there easily. I think what's interesting about this team is when you look at it, and they're potentially at this point, they really have no proven center on this team. So they're going to play basically small, at least until they decide they need to get a center and make some kind of a deal. They're going to basically play 5 guys on the perimeter. And so I think the question with this team heading into training camp is, what do you do with CJ McCollum? Does he start, or do you go with the big lineup? They brought in DeJounte Murray, so you know Murray's going to start. You know that Zion, Brandon Ingram are going to start. And then you have Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. I think Herb Jones has established himself as a starter. Trey Murphy is the guy that, when you look at the skill set that he brings to the table, and look, I love CJ McCollum, but he's 33 years old. I would say he's on the backside of his career. He'd probably be better served coming off the bench in sort of that 6-man sharpshooter role. And if you put Trey Murphy out there, now look, they don't have size maybe to contend with the Nikola Jokic's of the world, but other teams, when you start looking at those 5 guys, Murray, Murphy, Herb Jones, Ingram, and Zion, I mean, offensively, good luck if you're the other team trying to match up with that group. And to me, it's just a fun lineup. This is one of the more interesting teams, I think, in the league. One, obviously, we've been intrigued and interested in what Zion does since he first came into the league. And I just think these other guys, when you start putting that lineup out on the floor and trying to figure out how does it fit, what does it look like, that's just a fun team to figure out, hey, how are they going to play? So it'll be interesting to see what Willie Green comes up with offensively, and then how he tries to scheme around their lack of size on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, I could see this team flying up and down the floor and being one of the highest scoring offenses in the league this year if they're healthy. And I'm with you. I think this is an over. Again, obviously all dependent upon Zion's health, but I'm going over. I think it's a pretty safe over, in all honesty.
There you go. All right. The highest, and I have to check. I want to just make sure that I'm accurate in this, because the highest over under, Mike, other than the Boston Celtics, the Oklahoma City Thunder, 56.5. listen. Yes, Oklahoma City was good last year. But I just can't buy that they're getting to 57 wins this year. I just teams are going to figure it out. I think the teams in the West have gotten better even over the offseason. I think, you know, Memphis is going to be better. I think New Orleans is going to be better. I think Denver's going to be Denver. 57 is a lot of wins, Mike. That's a lot of wins. And they're still the youngest team in the league, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe Houston might be younger than them, but it's between the two of them, right? I'm trying to think. Orlando, maybe. I just can't argue for them to get to 57 wins. And I don't even remember how many wins they ended with last year, Mike. Maybe you can tell me that.
I can. Give me 1 second, but you keep talking and I'll look it up.
I just could all those guys stay healthy? Yes. I mean, SGA was terrible in the Olympics, right?
No, he was okay. I mean, he was definitely the bright spot for Canada. They won 57 games last year.
Okay, so they're right on the number. I think a little downturn is due here. I'm taking the under on this, Mike. So I just think I understand why they have the highest in the Western Conference, but I think that's too high.
That's fair. All right,
Too-
so they win 57 games, and you add Caruso, who, by the way, is the oldest player on the roster at age 30. Everybody else is in their 20s. You add Hartenstein, who had a really, really good year for the Knicks. And those two guys fill, I guess, I don't know if Caruso so much fills a need as just provides another guy who can play defense on the perimeter against really good wings. And then Hartenstein fills a need that they had where they just weren't big enough. Now that allows them to either shift Chet over to the power forward spot and play Hartenstein at center, or obviously when Hartenstein's off the floor, you can go back to what was their bread and butter this past season with Chet Holmgren at the 5. And I think you make a great point that there's just to think that they're going to go from 57 and jump up. They're still really, really young. And that's not to say that obviously young players, what do they tend to do? They tend to continue to improve and get better. So you'd expect that to happen. And yet at the same time, you look and you have to start to wonder at some point, do all these guys, I know that Shea clearly fills the number one spot in this team. Jalen Williams, there's been a lot of talk that he's headed for, whether it's the All-Star game or All-NBA contention. You've obviously got Chet, who was the number 2 pick in the draft, has the pedigree of being basically the best player in his class all throughout high school. So at some point you wonder if there's a hierarchy issue. I mean, I don't think there will be, but with young guys, you just never know how that's going to play itself out. And I think that they had really good health luck last year. And yeah, they're deeper. And yeah, they're versatile. And Shea has established himself, I think, clearly at this point as one of the 5 best players in the league. And you would think that Holmgren and Jalen Williams are going to continue to get better. But to get to 58, that feels like you're talking about a team that's just an absolute juggernaut that's going to be killing people every night. And I don't think a team this young is going to be at that level. Now, I think they're going to win 50 plus, and they might even be the best team in the West. But that's a big number. I don't see anybody in the Western Conference getting to that number, so I'm going under. I think they're going to be very, very good. They may end up being the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, but I don't think that they're going to get to 58 wins. I'm going under on Oklahoma City.
Sure. Phoenix Suns. Their over-under is 47.5, Mike. So the same as Memphis and the Cavs. Listen, this is hinged. This whole over-under again, and we've said this a lot, is hinged on how healthy is this team. How healthy is Durant? How healthy is Booker? And how is Beal? Booker has been traditionally healthy in his career. Accurate?
Fairly healthy. I mean, I wouldn't say he's
But
Iron
more
Man, but
more healthy than the other two in recent years. Right?
yes.
Okay. So I don't know why I'm like no, I'm not doing it. I'm saying under. I was gonna maybe go on over, but I think the 47 is probably 46, 47 is probably where they end up. But barely under, but I'm gonna go under. Um I don't have anything else to say on them. I mean, it's all hinged on their health. If they are healthy enough, then they probably will hit the over. But I just don't believe in it. And the other problem is they don't have after their big three and then their starters, like I mean, their bench is just as decrepit as the Lakers, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, depending on who you're going to start, I mean, they're probably going to start Tyus Jones, I would think, at the point guard and kind of take some of that ball handling pressure
And and
off
here's
of
the other
Blake.
thing. The other reason to take the under is because their coach, Coach Bud, under.
Okay, but Coach Bud is a good regular season coach. So I would agree with you that playoff wise, maybe, but I think regular season wise, I would say
So
Coach
you're
Bud to
going
me.
over. So you're going over.
No, I'm not. I'm not going over. I'm going under for certain on the Phoenix Suns, but not because of Coach Bud. To me, I think Coach Bud is a positive for Phoenix in the regular season. I mean, he's proven everywhere he's been, his teams have improved defensively, and his teams have been well coached in terms of being organized and just doing what they're supposed to do in the regular season. It's when he's had to make adjustments in the playoffs that he's struggled. So I think he's a plus as far as regular season goes. But look, of all the teams that you talk about the health, I think Phoenix is the most precarious because at this point, I don't know how you can rely on Bradley Beal in any way, shape, or form or depend on him to be on the floor. He's going to miss 50% of the games at this point, and you're going to pay him $50 million to do that. Booker, pretty solid bet to play a good number of games. Durant, I have no idea. He was healthy last year, but again, he's carrying a big load at age 36. He's got the Achilles injury in his past, along with a couple other things with his legs. To think that those three guys are going to play anywhere near 65 games apiece, I think is asking a lot. And yeah, they did make some moves like Tyus Jones, I think was a good addition for this team, despite the fact that they were kind of locked in and didn't really have many options. By picking up Jones, they also got Monte Morris, who I think can be a guy that can help them a little bit. Last year, they got Royce O'Neal. They still have a Koji. They have some pieces, again, that their bench is not good, but it's not completely horrific. They also have Grayson Allen, who last year led the league in three-point shooting. So there's some things here. I just don't believe in the health of those big three. And then it's kind of like I said with Memphis. When you take one of those big three guys out there and then you look at the roster, that's when it starts to get really thin. It doesn't look bad when you have those three guys on the floor. It starts to get real dicey real fast when you take one of those guys off the floor. And I'm not of the mindset that those guys are going to play 65 games apiece. So I'm going to go under on the Phoenix Suns.
Okay. All right, we've reached the dredge of the West, Mike. The Portland Trailblazers. They're over under. I want you to guess. They're over under, Mike.
Portland's over under is going to be, well, let me think. So in the East, the lowest one I think was the Nets at 18.5, if I'm not mistaken. So I have to believe that Portland's going to be lower than that. I'm going to go 17.5.
It's 21.5, Mike.
Oh, well, I know where I'm going on that one.
Under.
Yes, under.
Cooper Flag. They want Cooper Flag, Mike. Under. And that's there it is. What else do we?
I can see Cooper Flag in Portland.
Isn't he from Maine? Isn't he from Maine?
He is from Maine. So take him all the way to the other. Take him all the way to the
from
opposite
Portland
coast.
to the other.
I don't know. I just feel when you say Cooper Flag, Portland Trailblazer, I can see it. Now I hope that doesn't mean that he has the big man issues that unfortunately Portland has. So maybe I don't want to wish Cooper Flag to Portland and have him go the route of Bill Walton and Sam Bowie and Greg Oden. So maybe that's a direction that we want to steer him away from. But for some reason, I can see Cooper Flag, Portland Trailblazer. But all right, go ahead. I don't know if you want to analyze.
I don't have
Portland
anything
anymore.
else to say about Portland. I'm good. I'm ready to move on.
All right. Well, let me just add. So, any chance that Scoot Henderson is in a, I don't know if he's a bust, but is there any chance that Scoot Henderson comes anywhere close to what people thought he might be heading into the draft? Yeah, I agree with you. I think that ship to me, I think sailed last year. I just don't see him ever developing a reliable enough jump shot. And he wasn't nearly as explosive as he was advertised to be getting to the rim. There's a lot of talk that he's not even going to start this year, which when you start talking about that, you're like, this guy was the number 2 pick that you were kind of putting your whole rebuilding into. We're going to create this team around Scoot Henderson. Yeah, I'm out on Scoot as any kind of superstar player. And so then you look at what else they have. And it's funny because if you look at the roster and you look at individual guys, like there's guys here that make sense that you like that could be part of good teams. Like Denny Avdia, I know he came from Washington and now he's on another horrendous team, but I think Denny Avdia on a good team could be a functional player. We saw DeAndre Ayton. Now, look, I talked about Cat earlier and his mentality. I think DeAndre Ayton fits into the same category. But if you think back to the Phoenix-Milwaukee series in the NBA Finals, Ayton was as big a reason why Phoenix made it to the finals that year as anybody. He was so good on the defensive end of the floor, being able to step out and guard guys on the perimeter. And then it just feels like he has one idea of who he is, and what he really is something completely different from what he thinks. So who knows what happens with DeAndre Ayton's career? You could tell me a million different directions. Maybe at some point he figures it out and becomes a part of a meaningful team again, or maybe he just goes from losing franchise to losing franchise. Jeremy Grant, they can't wait to get rid of and get his contract off the books. Shaden Sharp, star potential. A guy's a great athlete, shown flashes. Is this the year that maybe he takes the next step? Could he be a guy that's going to average 20 a game on this terrible team? Anthony Simons, a good offensive player, not much on the defensive end of the floor. They got Robert Williams, who I'm guessing is going to get traded at some point if they can ever keep the Time Lord healthy. I mean, they drafted Donovan Clingan from Connecticut. This team is just a mismatch of parts, and they don't want to win games. And in the Western Conference, it's going to be very easy for them to lose. There's no way they get to 22 wins. I don't, because again, at some point they're probably going to have a fire sale and trade out guys like Grant and Robert Williams. And if they could find a buyer for Ayton, I'm sure they would trade him in a heartbeat. And then you're just looking at all the young guys trying to compete with these teams in the Western Conference. And I just don't see it. So I'm going way under on Portland.
Okay. 3 left, Mike. All right. Sacramento, 46.5. I'm going under, Mike. I know you're a big De'Aaron Fox fan, and Sabonis had a great season last year. But I just look at this Western Conference, and I just think this team is 44, 43, 44, 45 win team. I think asking for them to get to 48 is 47 is too much. Because what did they do to improve their team this offseason, Mike?
DeMar DeRozan.
I kind of forgot that he got added, but even adding him, I just don't see it.
All right, so let me make can I make the case for it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the case for it is that this is a regular season over-under, and it's not necessarily a playoff referendum. I think if you're looking at what this team is come playoff time. I still think they're going to have a hard time stopping people. But I also think in the regular season, where you don't have a ton of time to prepare for what they do and how they play, I think that they're just a very, very difficult team to defend. Sabonis is a really unique offensive player. And look, in the playoffs, he can get exposed. But in the regular season, where teams aren't hunting him and making him a liability on the defensive end nearly as much as they do in the playoffs, what he does offensively as a guy who can be the hub of an offense and running the dribble handoffs and screen rolls and being able to post guys up. He's just a very, very unique and good offensive player. And as you said, I'm a big fan of De'Aaron Fox. I think he's a guy who, if he wasn't playing in Sacramento, if he was in a bigger market, he'd be a much bigger name. De'Aaron Fox is a really, really good player. He's a top tier NBA guard. And then you had DeRozan, who, look, DeRozan is a guy who has flaws. He hasn't been a great defender, but he's improved in the later half of his career as a playmaker. He's been a very, very clutch player for the Chicago Bulls over the last couple of years. He certainly is a guy who offensively can get you buckets. So he fits with what they do, which is they're an offensive oriented team. And then Keegan Murray had a very good year last year. And I don't know what his ultimate ceiling is, but you have to think that he's going to continue to get better at the things that he does. And so I just like this team as a regular season team. I think they're tough to play because I think they play with pace. I think they have really good offensive talent. I'm not sure, again, when you get to the playoffs, defensively, what are they? Can they get to the second round? I don't know. But I do know that in the regular season that they're going to be difficult to play offensively. And that's why I think that they're going to be over that total of 46.5 in the regular season. I forgot they got Malik Monk back too. So keeping Monk really, I think, as that sixth man, he makes a big difference. He won games for them last year. And so they got a lot of pieces that I like. And I just think they're going to be difficult to stop offensively.
Okay. So you're going over, I'm going under.
Yep.
All right. The San Antonio Spurs. 35.5. Over. I'm going over, Mike. Add Chris Paul. Another year of Wemby. I mean, I think this team's is a play-in tournament team this year. I think they're close to 500, Mike. I'm going over. I mean, what else do I have to say? I mean, Wemby's going to have a great year. He was fantastic in the Olympics. He was fantastic last year. There's just not any world that I think this is close to the under. This is over.
I agree with you. I think Wemby is going to have a great year. I think adding Chris Paul makes a difference, provided he can stay healthy. We talked a lot about how when Wemby was on the floor last year with Tyus Jones and they had competent point guard play, that it made a difference. And this team was actually functional as an offensive team. They also added, sort of under the radar, Harrison Barnes. I know Harrison Barnes has flaws, but Harrison Barnes is a veteran guy. He's a good player. And yeah, in the playoffs, he has things that other teams can exploit. And he's not as good of a shooter as you might want him to be. But he's a guy who's been in lots of different situations. And as a veteran, I'm guessing that he's going to help them in the locker room. They got Stephon Castle, who nobody knows yet if he can shoot it, but I think he's going to bring some things to the table. They're going to allow him to be able to develop. The Sohan at point guard experiment is over. So now you're going to be, and I think I said Tyus Jones earlier. I meant Trey Jones. And you're going to have, basically, if Paul and Trey Jones are healthy, you're going to be able to put 48 minutes of competent point guard play out there with Wemby. And if that's the case, I think their offense is going to be fine. I think Vassell, if I'm not mistaken, he's been a little banged up. I'm not sure if he's back or going to be ready to play by the time the regular season comes along. But at some point, you'll get Devin Vassell back in the lineup, who's a guy who fits almost perfectly next to Wembanyama. The roster still has holes, and there's still a long way to go for the San Antonio Spurs to build a championship roster. But we're not asking him to build a championship roster to get to the over. We're asking him to get to 36 wins, which, if Wembanyama is as good as everybody thinks he is, that seems like a leap that this team's ready to take. So I'm with you. I think that the San Antonio Spurs go over.
All right. Last but not least, the Utah Jazz. 28.5. Mike, quick side note. So the Utah has a new hockey team. You know this, right? You know that Utah
No,
got a hockey team?
had no idea.
They got a new
Had
hockey
no idea.
team. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And Laurie
What's it called?
Markkinen dressed in the Utah Hockey Club.
That's what it's called?
Yeah.
The Utah Hockey Club? So like the
Yeah.
Washington professional football team?
Basically.
It should be like we should have stuck with the Cleveland professional baseball team.
Yep, the Utah Hockey Club.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Okay.
Who's suiting up for that team? Gretzky? Lemieux?
I don't know.
Lindros?
But here's what I'm gonna
Ovechkin?
tell you.
Ovechkin?
Here's what I'm gonna tell you.
Grant
Laurie
Fuhr?
Markkinen delivered the puck tonight in full hockey gear. Laurie Markkinen
Nice.
delivered the puck in full hockey gear. Anyways,
on skates? They couldn't have put him on skates. I can't imagine.
well, I can't imagine they would have. But
What'd you say the number was? 28.5?
28.5.
Whew, I know what I'm going on that one.
You're going under, right?
Oh, that's a way under, man. There's no way.
They're-
There's no way.
Yeah, I agree.
Danny Ainge might kill Will Hardy if they get anywhere close to 28.5 wins.
I'm trying to see. I want to see.
This team's tanking. This team is completely tanking to try to get into the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. And look, I mean, their roster, honestly, when you talk about
Oh, he was on skate. He was totally on skates, Mike.
really,
He's
okay.
totally on skates.
Nice
Come
job.
on, where's Laurie Markkinen from again? Come on.
Finland.
He was definitely ice skating when he was in Finland. Come on
Right,
now.
but I don't know, but would you really put your 7 foot, $40 million superstar in a pair of skates? I think
It looks like he's
Anyway.
got good form too. I'm gonna say I sent it to you, Mike. You can check it out
All right.
later.
All right, all right, I'll check it out. I'll get the scouting report, the Markkinen hockey scouting report. All right, the Utah Jazz. They actually, I mean, their roster, if this team was trying to win, it's actually not a horrendous roster if you're trying to win games. I mean, because you could throw out a lineup with John Collins, Walker Kessler, Larry Markkinen. You could have a worse front court than that. I know people have soured kind of on John Collins, and Kessler didn't have nearly the sophomore year that he had in his freshman year, but he's a guy who clearly, I'm talking Walker Kessler, defensively has the ability to block shots, has some offense, and had a really promising rookie year and then just kind of tailed off last year. And Collins has a skill set, just hasn't really figured it out other than that 1 year in Atlanta where they had the playoff run to the conference finals. And it seemed like he had kind of figured himself out as a high-level role player and then just has never really gotten back to that. And then, of course, we know what Markkinen has been. And then you look at their guard rotation, and you got Clarkson, you got Colin Sexton, you got Keontae George, who they drafted a year ago. And there's enough pieces here that if this team was trying to win, I think the 28.5 is probably realistic, but there's no way this team's trying to win. And I think that either you're going to have deals in the middle of the season where if they can unload Clarkson, if they can unload Colin Sexton, if they can unload Collins, they're going to try to do that. And I just don't think this team's trying to win. And so to ask them to get to 29 wins when they're not actually trying to win games, I just don't see that happening, despite the fact that I think they have some pieces on their roster that other teams are going to want, and that if they tried to put together a cohesive lineup, that they probably could win 29 games, but I don't think they're going to try to do that. So I'm staying under with Utah.
Okay. All right, we did it, Mike.
Western Conference in the books. We did all the over-unders. So last week we did the Eastern Conference. So if you want to check that out, you can look at that episode back in the back catalog. And tonight we did the Western Conference. Next week, are we going to go predictions,
I think we're gonna.
tiers, draft? What are we doing?
I think we need to do predictions and draft, Mike.
Okay. All right.
I think the tiers can wait.
Oh, the tiers can just kind of come in. Yeah, maybe we do the tiers a week or two into the season after we see what's happening. Or maybe we just incorporate the tiers into the predictions. That could be another way for us to kind of.
We don't need to
about
do
it.
a 2-hour podcast next week, Mike.
We don't. Hey, we did a little faster. We were a little. Well, maybe we were.
No,
a
we
little
weren't,
faster
Mike.
tonight. We weren't.
No. I mean, how long was last week's episode?
Hour and 25. So we're only at an hour and 15. So I feel like we.
Well, we're
I
not
feel
talking about. We're not talking about that football team because I
like,
did not watch it.
You don't want to talk Browns? Why
No,
not,
I didn't
man?
watch a minute of it. I was at Cedar Point riding roller coasters.
Here's all I'll say. The franchise should go away. Let's send them away for another 3 years. Let's bring them back and let's change the colors. Let's change it all. Give us some, give us a new team, the Spiders, what were the other names the Guardians were considering? Bring back can we be the Rams? Can we steal the Rams names back? I don't know, whatever. This iteration, this season's a complete farce. It is a complete farce. That's all I have to say. So I'm done.
Yep.
No more. Move on.
Go Guards.
We'll see what happens. So playoff baseball is, as we've said many times,
Fickle.
It's fickle, but it's fun. Playoff baseball is so fun. Although here's what I will say. I'm not sure for playoff baseball. I'm not sure I like the pitch clock. I almost felt like, now look, I told you that was the first baseball game I've watched from beginning to end. Game 2 of the Guardians Tigers series yesterday, and that's the first game I've watched with the pitch clock from beginning to end. And the game went, again, the pace is really fast. I mean, it moves. So I can see for a regular season game where that would be a huge benefit. But I almost felt like it didn't feel like the same level of tension because the pitches were coming so quickly that you weren't getting the shots of the crowd and the different things that felt like they were a part of postseason baseball. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I just have to get used to it. But still, the tension of postseason baseball, where you can go from everything looks good to all of a sudden you're losing, or all of a sudden you're winning. There's nothing like that in sports in my mind. Maybe overtime in hockey, I guess, is a similar theory to it. But man, you just feel like you're on edge. You just feel like you're on edge the entire game. And I'm not even super invested in it, obviously, since I'm not watching regular season baseball or anything like that. But even with my limited interest in baseball in the regular season, just to watch postseason baseball with a team that you're even mildly interested in, it's definitely an enjoyable experience, but also one that keeps you on the edge of your seat. So kudos to baseball for that, at least.
All right. We've said it. We've done it all.
We're done.
We've done it all.
Over-unders are in the books. We appreciate you checking us out tonight. And we will be back next week with our season predictions. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on our next episode. Thanks.